with you.
The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to St. Luke.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd he could not, because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see him, because he was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." So he hurried down and was happy to welcome him. All who saw it began to grumble and said, "He has gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner." Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much." Then Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost." This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer.
Amen.
So, who are you in the story of Zacchaeus up his tree? That may be an odd question, because these characters have just appeared on a page, and you are here in the flesh. The events of this story took place long ago, and you are a contemporary man or woman in Anno Domini 2020. But one of the ways to study a passage, and one of the ways of studying a passage with parishioners or a small group, is to ask the question at the outset: who do you identify with? Are you Jesus, trying to make peace in a situation where folks imagined no peace was possible? Do you have some relevant experience of this? Have you tried to make peace in your family? Have you tried to make peace in your place of work? Or do you identify with the crowd, looking upon a commonly agreed enemy with a sense of community zeal, loathing the man they hated, and then with almost something approaching outrage when the hated man isn't equally despised by Jesus? Do you yourselves have some gripe with somebody who was let off the hook when in fact they should have received both barrels from the boss, from parents, from the courts, from your parish priest, from the bishop? It wasn't just, you say. They deserved more punishment than they got. Or are you Zacchaeus, looking longingly at something you have no right to, like a poor child standing outside of a candy shop, looking at what you cannot have? Who are you in the story of Zacchaeus up his tree? We pass on what we receive. Some of you may have the experience of having said the same things to your children that your parents said to you, and having broken your vow constantly never to be the sort of person that your parents were, and yet you look in the mirror and you see dad or mom looking back at you, and you listen to your words and they are the same words, even the same adages that mom and dads used. People who have been bullied over the years can easily and often become bullies and abusers themselves one day. And the gospel tells us that Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector. And in that, I want you to understand a professional bully. What does the old adage say? The polite, you see, the problem with the adages is my dad's side of the family told me wonderful stories, but they're all very rude, and none of them can appear in sermons. So the polite version is that you should not get into a tussle with a skunk. You'll end up covered with smelly stuff, and the skunk will enjoy himself. Best keep your head down. Best to practice active avoidance. And that's what this crowd did constantly with Zacchaeus and his ilk. And it was part of Zacchaeus' job description to tolerate being intensely disliked by his neighbors. Luke is clear to tell us that he is a nasty man in nasty employment. Tax farming was a standard practice. The money ended up in the hands of the emperor, but they used local bullies in order to extort this tax, to remove this tax from ordinary people. Of course, they added a percentage for themselves. They were opportunists and bullies in the pay of oppressive powers, of the Romans in Judea and of the Herodians in the Galilee. So it might come as no surprise, given my opening statement, that St. Luke further describes Zacchaeus as being short in stature, or a wee little man, as the children's song has it. You might use your imagination. You could editorialize that there is an entire childhood filled with jibes and ridicule, which have somehow become concretized in Zacchaeus, a lifetime's work of payback against his own community, the slow working out of a very well-developed grudge. Short, no longer. Little, no longer. No longer wee. He remains an outsider, but is now a powerful and dangerous outsider. Now the story hinges around Jesus' shout up into a sycamore tree to a man that the crowd has not yet seen, but who turns out to be Zacchaeus, where Zacchaeus is listening from a safe but privileged vantage point. Zacchaeus, Jesus calls out, come down. Now the community's expectation, perhaps the reader's expectation, is that Jesus is now going to exclude, damn, and excoriate the unlovable traitor and exploiter of the people. Because this is what charismatic leaders do with bullies. They confront them. Win or lose, they will not leave them unchallenged. Now, if we jump to the end of the story, we find that the onlookers are robbed of a bloody and expected confrontation and a satisfying denouement. Jesus' words to Zacchaeus are a form of confrontation, but one which leaves the hated man unbloodied. There has been no fatal blow. The righteous expectations of the community are unsatisfied. Back to the question I began with. Who are you in this story? Who do you see? I think it is clear that the gospel writer sees us in the crowd, having our minds changed about God. Generations of pious religious folks have seen the dividing of the world into dark and light, good and bad, in and out, as one of the things that the rabbi, the priest, the guru, and the prophet do. Tell us who is in, and tell us who is out. Show us how to be in, is what we mean. Give us a clear example of who is out, is what we really mean. What does it mean to be confronted by love, convicted by kindness, bowled over by an unbidden opportunity, or bashed over the head by a second chance? Any other response on Jesus' part would have confirmed the otherness of Zacchaeus and kept him at a distance. But Jesus seems to be more interested in change than he is in damnation, even though the crowd might have applauded. The crowd would give this last sentence their assent. Yes, of course, God is interested in change. We hope he is, because we could do with some changes too. And we hope that the door to that will be open to us, and that God will work with us in this life to change what he can, and someday, perhaps, put aside those things that might otherwise have damned or excluded us. And Jesus here is sharpening what we think we already know. He makes an application of it to somebody that we hate. If God can do this for us, then he can do this for Zacchaeus too. You cannot have one without the other. It is this interest in the lot of sinners, which is the tax collector's only hope, and his ascent up the trunk of the sycamore tree to its higher branches is what stands here as his act of faith. This impulse to see and hear for himself what he never imagined he would be worthy of receiving. And what Luke, the evangelist, drawing on his special material, because this appears in no other gospel, wants us to understand is that Jesus' engagement with Zacchaeus is the only hope of the gathered onlookers to the story. The ones gathered with Jesus under the sycamore tree, and the ones gathered in the chapel of the Anglican Centre in Rome in 2020. It is the only hope of the contemporary hearers of this story as well. Our interest in the perfect justice of God might be ideological or even theological. Our interest in his blessed mercy is intensely personal. Should bow our heads.